And now hand you back over to Marion Thatcher. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Brooke Wrigley probably needs no introduction to many of you. You've heard her name, you've read things that she's written, and you've been aware of some of the projects she's been in, but I'm going to give her a quick introduction anyway. Heida's been involved in adult education and training for many years, like many of us, I will say parenthetically. She was part of Accelerate Texas, an early career pathway model that links basic skills students with vocational technical training in demand occupations. She is now the subject matter expert for ESL Pro, where her work includes professional development on preparing students for work and career pathways. Her current work also includes consulting for the Ready to Work program in Seattle, supported by the city, and advising the Carlos Rosario International Adult Charter School in Washington, D.C. on work-focused ESL. So you can see she has a lot of experience and knowledge in this area, and we're very, very happy to have her here with us today. So I'm going to turn it over to Haida.
All right, Marion, did you want to say something about the upcoming webinar with Jamie?
I'll do that at the end, Haida.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks, everyone. It's just wonderful to know that there's so much interest and such a large group. As some of you may know, I spent a lot of years in California, first teaching at Cal State Long Beach and doing work with vessel and refugee resettlement in that area, later on in the Bay Area, working for an international company to look at the kind of skills that people need to come with higher skills, but also looking at immigrant integration as the larger issue. So I'm thrilled that you're here for our talk on what's up with career pathways. That was kind of our working title. We want to focus on strategies that work, instructional strategies that work in the classroom, but also program models that have been successful in the field. So I'm hoping this can be interactive. We'll stop in between to get your opinion, to see what you have to say. And at the end, we'll also, provide plenty of time to ask questions and get your ideas. Let me start quickly with an agenda. Okay, we're already done with introduction, navigating Adobe Connect. We'll start with a little bit of a poll. I want to set the broader socio-political and economic context for career pathways, why this work is bubbling up all of a sudden as important, not so all of a sudden for some of us, but certainly, with the focus in WIOA, there's new life being breathed into the old models. Breathed, is that the right past tense? Sounds funny, huh? I'll have an example of a career pathway. What does it look like? Again, directly from the field. We'll talk about what it takes to teach and support students who are moving on to career pathways and transitioning. I'll have some models for you to look at. And I'll end with a little bit of good news about financial federal aid that students are now eligible for if they're in a career pathway program, just in case you had not heard about that. We'll ask for your questions and comments at the end as well as in the middle. And I'll show you some of my favorite resources. And but from there, from this agenda, let's move directly to some polling questions. I'm very much interested in terms of where you are on that continuum from, hey, we've been doing this forever, I'm just here because I didn't have anything else to do this afternoon, to, well, actually, I'm brand new to this, and maybe you could go a little bit more slowly. So if you could just let us know where on this continuum you might fit. If your exact spot isn't part of those 4 questions, if you could just do what they tell me when I do the work I do in Africa, just do the best you can and pick one of the answers that might come closest. So Jennifer, you want to talk quickly about what people should do? Or does everybody know you just click the box and it will show up?
Yeah, so we have the program readiness poll right there in front, and it looks like most everyone, maybe 1 or 2 votes still remaining, and we'll be able to, you're seeing the results as they happen. Okay, Haida, and it looks
Wow.
like we have, there we go. Are you able to see the everybody's answers, I think?
And so it's exciting to see that, pretty much half of you already got started and have started to build some partnerships. And there are still a few of you who are looking for first steps. So at any time, if I either tell you things that you already know, I'll try to talk a little faster. If you let me know, and if you need more explanations, just feel free to stop me by raising the hand. If I don't see it, Marianne, feel free to say, we have a note here from somebody in the audience. Okay, good deal. Thanks a lot. So moving on from here, let's just talk a minute about the broader context. By now you've probably heard about the fact that although we have millions of people who are unemployed or underemployed, there are jobs out there, and those jobs tend to be in those mid-level jobs that have to do with the trades, electrician, plumbers, but also with mid-level jobs like accounting and support services for IT. A lot of our students aren't eligible for those jobs. They are underprepared because they, don't quite have the technical skills, those job skills, or they're still developing their basic skills and their English language skills. So that we're looking at a shared goal to change this situation, and it's shared, I think, between not only all of us, but also between our students ourselves. I keep hearing students say all the time, I don't want to have two jobs. I don't want to run out of money at the end of the month and not be able to move forward. Our students want to thrive. We want them to thrive. And the catchword these days is we want our students to have good jobs for good wages that will allow those who are still struggling to move out of poverty, but allow everybody to make enough money to support a family. One of the challenges we have is to work together with partners who are working with the same population, who are concerned about jobs and also are concerned about education. But right now, for the longest time, we've had those of us in adult education doing our thing. We prepare students to develop their skills, prepare them for high school equivalency, and then we sort of hand them over with a certificate or not, with a diploma, to the other folks who are doing the training. Or if somebody has trouble, we refer them to a social service agency to help them navigate their lives. So for right now, we're looking at breaking down those silos and starting collaboration and partnerships with others. And the most important partnerships, as far as WIOA, Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, is concerned, is to start building pathways between adult education, training providers, and others who can support students and help them get those better jobs. So the strategy is really to build on existing networks that connect those who provide other services with adult education through those collaborative partnerships. So that in the end, we have an integrated system that works for students, so they themselves don't have to figure out how to bridge from one set of programs to another, but we're actually explicitly building those transitions. So just to get us all on the same page, so to speak, and there it is. How is a career pathway defined? Okay. Connecting education and training, and very importantly, I think, also connecting support services to our adult education programs and to connect them to collaborative programs so that students get help when they get an eviction notice or when they cannot come to school because they ran out of money at the end of the month and they cannot pay the rent or they cannot even get those bus tickets. The other change, the important change from the old vessel programs or the old basic skills for work programs, is now we're looking at industry relevant certification. I remember a time a long time ago where a lot of students were being put in programs because the machinery was bought, it was there, and we had instructors who know how to teach those technical skills. And so at the end of the line, there may not have been a job that people had a certificate for. So the shift is now to figure out what are the kinds of jobs locally and to focus on an occupational area, not just on academic areas for transition, and help students move on, or at least let them see how they can move on and get the support they need. So what are some of those entry points for mid-level jobs? Here we have a split screen. And on the left side, you see some of these examples. So a lot of programs focus on healthcare, starting with home health aides, CNA, moving to patient care, and then up towards licensed vocational, and eventually to nursing, even though there's still a big gap between those support positions in healthcare and registered nursing itself. In some area, manufacturing is growing, so that technicians who can work on the new high-tech lines, machine operators are still in demand. And in construction, it starts at the lower levels with painting and plastering. And the new model that I like a lot is to really look at women becoming forklift operators, because you can work in construction, you can make good money, but you don't have to have the muscle powers that traditionally expected in construction. In new development, we're seeing more people interested in a pathway that looks at education in early childhood education, now with a big emphasis on early learning. There are pathways being developed, some of them bilingual pathways, for childcare providers, which may start with at-home childcare and then move towards working in a preschool or in a nursery school or an early education program. On the right side, there's an example of a pathway for pharmacology out of a project I've been working with in South Texas. You can see in the little box that students start with basic skills, math. They move on to kind of a pre-GED or are in an ESL program. And because it's South Texas and most people speak Spanish and a lot of people only speak Spanish, we also started a class that teaches Spanish terminology for the profession. So if you're in healthcare, you learn how to sound like a professional when you talk to clients and not like, you know, a teenager trying to explain what mom does to her friends. Okay. There's employability skills, and students are co-enrolled in a contextualized GED and a technical training program. So this is a dual enrollment program. They then move up to a 4-credit program in pharmacology, get the next certificate, and at the same time have a college prep academy that gets them ready for the college placement test for academic skills, and at the same time, you know, teaches the kind of learning how to learn skills that students need. And so there it is. We have some more of these pathways for you to look at in the handouts, and we'll mention those a little bit later on. I want to talk a little bit about our students, the needs and the challenges that you all well know if you're in the classroom, and that you might also know if you're an administrator trying to set up a program. You may remember this question from way back when we all talked about whom do we serve? Do we serve the system? A system which may have a tendency to cream our students and try to fit whatever students fit into the system and are sad that the rest might not have a place? Or do we serve our students and try to build new systems that really work for the kinds of students at higher levels as well as at lower levels? And of course, it's never that clear-cut. It's always somewhere in the middle. But I always think that this question helps originally to kind of situate our thinking and map out a pathway for ourselves in terms of how we want to approach this work. As you all know, there's 2 large groups, the English speakers and English learners. I think it's important to find out whether people have had work experience, and it doesn't mean work experience in a formal system, right? It can be having worked part-time, organizing birthdays and setting up these big Sunday, food brunches on Mother's Day, skills that really are being developed around organization and time management. Have students list those, talk about them, and compare what kinds of skills they have and what they like to do and what they didn't like to do. What you did, was that a good job? Can you see that as a career? What would be a dream career? So rather than starting with these are the kinds of jobs available, we start with where students are, what their hopes are, what their dreams are. The biggest difference in my mind between English learners and English speakers is that we have such a broad range of skills, educational skills, among the English learners. So you probably have had students who may have certificates, technical certificates, professional degrees. And so it makes a lot of sense to me to look at this group, look at possibilities for re-credentialing, and really set up workshops and other models that help these students to talk about what they know, what they've done, and talk about their professional experience and build on that. One of the things that we found through the Welcome Back Centers, which work specifically with the high-skilled groups, that a lot of the professionals really needed a chance to talk about what it means to lose their status. So the story we hear time and time again is, I used to be somebody, and now I'm just somebody, who drives a cab and, has a license as a dentist, but I can't work here. And so nobody knows that I used to have an important place in my community. And then, of course, there are students who have less than high school who still need to develop background knowledge as to how a technical area might work. A lot of concepts are new to them. A lot of vocabulary needs to be taught. And they may have work experience, but it may tend to be at those lower levels. But again, that experience can be a jumping off point for where they see themselves going. And helping those students really have high expectations of themselves and not feel just because they don't have much education, they're always, resigned to having to work in a service job. So what are some of the barriers? And in a minute, I'll ask you about what you see as barriers with the students and the programs that you've worked with. In a lot of areas, and this may not be true for California for your program, but it's certainly true for New Mexico, where I live now. New Mexico, it's neither new nor it's Mexico, but it's pretty close to Old Mexico in some ways. So in some areas, the ABE and ESL programs have built bridges. In other places they have not. In a lot of places, those bridges are still a little shaky. And in some areas, you as a student have still to kind of navigate the shark-infested waters to try to make it over the other side and get into a training program that works for you if your skills aren't at the highest level yet. Which is the related issue of most training programs. There are exceptions. Are designed for students at the advanced levels. A lot of them require high school equivalency or an advanced level of ESL. So if you have beginning level students, they see themselves having to spend months and years before their skills are up to a level that is required for training. So I see a real need for all of us to work together on models that allow for hands-on training at the same time where students still get a chance to develop their skills while they're getting training at the same time. So kind of integrated or concurrent model for the lower levels. These kinds of programs don't need to be semester-based. They can be competency-based programs, so you just stay however long you need to stay in order to get the certificate. So some may be able to get it in 6 months, others may take 8 months or a year, but everybody gets a start doing some real work and using their hands to develop some real skills. I already mentioned that we really need accelerated models for people who come in with degrees and are more higher skilled. accelerated programs that can take advantage of what technology has to offer, independent reading, small groups that can be facilitated by a coach. It doesn't have to be a class. Maybe Saturday workshops for people to talk and think about recredentialing, or what they can do or may want to do if they cannot be a physician in this country, because it's a lot of money that's required, and most of us wouldn't have that kind of money if we came from another country as a refugee, say. Life challenges, you all have lots of stories of the kind of complex lives that students live. And traditionally, there have been little support beyond the classroom. You, if you were a teacher, probably were the ones that students came to and saying, oh, my grandfather is getting really, really ill, and I have to take care of him. I don't know how I could sign up for a training class that meets 20 hours a week. So this kind of support is something that really needs to be in place if our students are supposed to persist and to help them succeed. We're finding more and more that students are working, particularly ESL students. The majority of LEP students are actually in the workforce. So working 40 hours and then be expected to be in a training program for half a week is very difficult for some. If classes are only offered during the day and you have a day job, it makes it difficult to move from a real entry-level job that could be a dead-end job to another area. So there need to be new models that really take that into account. And there's a lot of new technology options. It's kind of anytime, anywhere learning with a lot of coach support or teacher support. And we really haven't explored that enough or made it possible for students to really have access to technology if they cannot quite afford a data plan. Because even with loaner laptops or tablets, the data plan may be the sticky point that keeps them from learning with online resources. Okay, so I've already talked a lot. I would like to turn it over to you for a couple of minutes, and I'm wondering, what do you see as some of the major barriers that students face that make it difficult for them to become part of a career pathway that would start with where they are and move them towards skills training and down the road a decent job? Gretchen, hello.
And you can feel free to type into the what barriers do students face, and then that way we can keep the conversation in that one pod instead of in the general chat. But we'll take those comments that are in the general chat too.
And I am looking at some of those answers, and yes, you can see there's a multitude of barriers. Some of them are related to what we talked about, but also other ones that have to do with kind of social emotional issues, not being able to believe in themselves. We'll talk a little bit about that. Gretchen mentioned, undocumented status, which of course is a huge issue in some areas, particularly California, Texas, New York, places where immigrants, constitute a high percentage of the population, and many students are here without papers. Resources and money is limited, so more and more programs are looking at options to provide scholarship. There are those fear factors, the fact that students don't know how to get to know others in their field. And some of those are a little bit more easily dealt with as we all sit down and think about what we might do. The child care, Options are often not available. Many times support services are able to provide that child care option if your students are eligible for TANF, for, temporary need for families, or if they're workforce eligible, that is, they have lost their job or don't qualify for current jobs. And many times if you build a relationship with K-12 programs, they're able to provide some of that child care that your students might need. So a lot of times it becomes sitting down in the community with partners to say, okay, these are major barriers. What can we do? What can we do about money and resources, about getting transportation vouchers, who is able to provide child care, and looking for funding that supports a component that generally in adult education we've not been able to afford. So as we all advocate for new models, I think it becomes important to kind of summarize some of those barriers and document that if career pathways are supposed to be a reality for our students, there are some additional components that need to be in place if students at the lower levels are to be able to make it through and participate in job training that is typically offered for money at a college or at a private provider and takes an intensive amount of time. I think what keeps popping up here and what you're saying as well is, the issue of people having to work. They cannot afford to take time off of work, so they're in a bind. I would like to get a better job to make more money so I don't have to work 2 jobs, but in the meantime, I have to work 2 jobs to support my family. So we have kind of a vicious cycle going on here, and I think that's worth a discussion as well. Accelerating and fast tracking for not just for higher skilled students, but also for students who are highly motivated and are able to make the time to do more, to learn further and learn faster, or as they say in some places, learn more better while they are still dealing with all the other issues in their lives. Sorry, I'm getting a little background noise here, which may be somebody in traffic picking it up.
Haida, just say when you're ready to go back to the slides.
Okay. Yes, and Ms. Tineo, I didn't see the first name quick enough, also points out the lack of document literacy, that there's a lot of forms that need to be filled out, a lot of applications that need to be submitted. So to have somebody in your program who can help students navigate the paperwork becomes important, because so many of us, are just stunned by the regular paperwork that those of us with higher skills have to fill out and wonder about. So we can only imagine what somebody with lower skills or lower English would need to face. So it was Gladys. Thanks, classes. So yes, I think we're ready to move on. And thank you, everybody, for outlining those. I hope we can capture them and, collect them and basically start talking about them or writing about them at some later time so it can be shared with everyone. So then what can be done in terms of teaching and supporting ABE and ESL students? So we'll talk a little bit about classroom strategies before moving on to models. Through interviews and observation and doing this work as part of the AIR Pro ESL project, Octave funded, thank you very much, I'm started to cluster the top needs into 3 areas, so we don't have to talk about everything forever and, duplicate what we said before. And one is the strong need for comprehensive models that offer support along with education and connections to training. Opportunities for deeper learning. I started doing work in deeper learning and hard fun and looking at more rigorous frameworks. Flexible program options, as many of you have mentioned. So what might those look like? Comprehensive models, this is what WIOA envisions, and thank you very much. So now all we need is the resources to make this happen, right? And the time and the money to sit down with others and spend significant time in planning. And WIOA does imagine that we make connections to social services that provide support, to community-based organization, immigrant-serving agencies, if you're working with ESL students, and who in California is not. The community college, both the credit and the non-credit program, not just the ABE ESL program, but also continuing education. And you'd be surprised how difficult it is to get an academic credit program to talk to a non-credit program and try to develop a pathway that everybody is involved in that really develops a seamless transition and students don't have to start again once they get to the credit side. Again, I know that some of you are working in community colleges in California, and I'm pretty sure that's not the case where you are, or I'm hoping it's not, but this has been a major sticky area in some other states. I mentioned already connections with public schools. There are a lot of parents who are very interested in career pathways for themselves and for their kids, and who want to learn more about technology and want to figure out how to support their children as they get assignments that involve technology, or as they're being asked to go on a website to read what the homework is. So this kind of support an adult education program can provide while linking it to career awareness at the same time. So here's the crisis piece. California has developed a document that we're calling From In Crisis to Thriving, that basically documents where students are on the continuum from being really overwhelmed with issues to actually doing pretty well and being ready financially and otherwise to take on a training program. And I'll be happy to share that with everyone at the end. I didn't think to post it. It just came to me, so I apologize. But it's the Family and Community Development Matrix that's being used in California and in other places. I apologize. What is a CBO? It's a community-based organization, and in other parts of the world, community-based organizations are also known as NGO, non-governmental agencies. So thank you, Marianne, for also jumping in and explaining some of the abbreviations that I shouldn't be using, but I forgot. TANF is Temporary Assistance to Needy Family, what used to be called Welfare to Work. What the students really appreciate, being in programs where there is, in some areas, Indiana calls them a life coach or a navigator who basically advocates for them, who goes to bat and says, we really need programs for this group of students. Or I have a student who's coming through the cracks. Okay, everybody, what are we going to do here? So because students don't always get the support from their families and their friends, as sad as that is, I hear lots of reports from my sister-in-law keep saying, yeah, so why do you want to do this? Why don't you stay home and take care of the kids and cook for my brother? So having somebody who's not part of the family, who believes in you and who's on your side, and as one student said, and not on your back, even though they do some gentle pushing, is really appreciated. By the same token, having a one-to-one relationship with somebody who provides emergency food services, who does have childcare available, or who can give transportation assistance or help when you cannot pay the rent, is really important. In the past, a lot of times we just gave students a list with referrals. Here, talk to people over there. Here's the phone number. It doesn't work. Our students are not often confident enough to take that next step. But if you say, hey, if you go on Friday and you talk to Maria, she expects you to come and she can let you know, what might be available for you. And I've already given her a call. So if you or your navigator has the ability to do this kind of work, it really makes a big difference and keeps students connected to the program. That social support from peers, friends, and family is important. As I said, sometimes it's there in some parts of the family, not in others. One of the projects I work with have started to have students develop sociograms. I don't know if you remember those from sociology, which we're no longer teaching, or anthropology, but it basically has students lay out, okay, who are the people who are on your side? Who are the people who are kind of these toxic folks who give you negative messages? How can you build on the community of people who really want you to succeed and who support you? Who are they? Let them know what your dreams are. Ask them to help you out when you're discouraged. And maybe as a program, you can have an open house where people bring in those who are on their side that they want you to get to know and that they want to celebrate in between or at a graduation along with everybody else. Because it's for all of us, it's really helpful to have somebody who believes in us when we're feeling overwhelmed and we're feeling down. So if you can do that for your students, either as a teacher or work with somebody in your program who fills that role, your students will thank you. And so will the rest of us. Here is just a little example from a program, a student in a program who echoed what other students said as well. I wanted to point out that the extreme importance of working in a cohort model as students move through a contextualized basic skills class or contextualized GED towards a pathway training program. That having an advisor, having an instructor, and having other students who can do that. You know, you have it in you. Don't be encouraged. Somebody discouraged. Somebody who goes to the house to find out what's going on if somebody hasn't come to class for 3 times. Somebody who takes the students aside and saying, hey, we're your friends here in this class. So discussing with students early on what kind of group you want to build or they want to build. This kind of, do we want to be musketeers, one for all and all for one? Or how do we want to be with each other as a community? Donna Price, who's here, Donna, hi, and Brigitte Marshalls and others early on have talked about this kind of buddy system, buddying students up and creating a welfare committee for the class, a welcome committee in the class. So when a new student comes in during that first week, when new students can't come in, or somebody had to leave because they were having a baby and then they come back, so that there's somebody there to welcome them, to get them caught up and connect them to the community. So cohort models, community building, connections. All right, a little bit for the classroom. As I mentioned, you know, it's fun to start looking at new models that look at deeper learning, you know, part of the George Lucas funded projects that also fund project-based learning, and what's being known as hard fun. So hard fun essentially is our tasks and activities and projects that are relevant to students' lives, rigorous, that meaning they challenge students while also providing support, engaging, everybody's involved, and joyful in some way. You'll be hearing from Jamie Allison Goldstein in a couple of weeks, and who really is an example of supporting lighthearted teaching and joyful learning. And so you should be able to get some ideas from her as well. So yeah, you don't have to give up on bingo just because now things are getting serious and rigorous, but I'm hoping that maybe you'll consider Jeopardy, you know, and having students create their own questions and answers for the kinds of hard stuff they need to learn as they move forward. We know that learning happens when there's cognitive, social, and emotional engagement. So often the teachers that I work with, I encourage them to think about each task that they're developing every time they develop a unit to say, okay, where's the cognitive challenge here? Do I have enough problem solving? Where's the social element? Is there enough peer-to-peer interaction and group work going on? And what about emotional engagement? Are we talking about issues that matter to students, whether either have strong opinions or where they go, wow, I had no idea this was happening. So if you think about all those 3 levels and you hit all 3, not necessarily in the same lesson, then I think there's a good chance that learning will stick and your students will stay engaged and perhaps be able to persist. We already talked about peer-to-peer. One of the things I've seen happen just in wonderful ways is to have students work with a partner or work in a small group and explain vocabulary to each other. If you're like me, you probably taught vocabulary, you taught it really well, you had examples, you had prefixes and suffixes, you talked about related words, semantic maps, you assumed everybody got it. And then it turns out when I turned it over to students, they explained those words to each other that half the students actually didn't quite have a good enough sense. Okay, shame on me, not having taught well enough. But seeing students go back and forth and give each other examples from their own lives and making up, illustrations and drawing something so that students at lower levels can get it always also really has been a successful approach, and I've really liked seeing it. Same idea, small group instruction, project-based learning teaches all the soft skills you ever want to learn, and turning things over to students so they become producers of knowledge, producers of information, and creators of information, not just consumers of information, is an important thing to keep in mind. I work with some technical instructors, and I'm really hoping to move them towards a more project-based learning approach as they try to make hard stuff accessible to our students. The real world demands, as you know, there's a lot of requirements for higher level communication skills in the workplace, to be able to explain a problem, to apologize, to give reasons for why your homework was not done if you're in a training program. So the kinds of tasks that students are expected to know as they move through a training program are important. Above all, I hear from students is that they're surprised at how many requirements for listening comprehension there are. So that I have to sit and listen to the teacher like for 10 minutes to just talk. If you come from a really good basic skills class, that doesn't happen, right? We all have all of these interactions. So all of a sudden, I'm supposed to pay attention, take notes. I can't listen and take notes at the same time. And then the teacher asks me questions, and there's a right or a wrong answer. Well, we don't often have a right or a wrong answer in adult ed. Every answer is a good answer, right? It's a very good answer, Maria. Does anybody have another answer? And all of a sudden you get marked down if you don't have the right answer. So listening comprehension, building it in ways where the answers count, and students are asked to focus both on the global meaning, what are we talking about here, what's the point, and on listening for details. And anybody who's done CASAs, should be familiar with a little bit of that, listening for details, but now it's in a work and career context. Navigating textbooks absolutely throws our students. Many of our students, conscientious students, spend, all their allotted homework time on the first page when they're supposed to be, finishing an entire chapter. They just get overwhelmed. They look up every word. They get really frustrated. They highlight and get lost in the details. So showing students how to use the table of contents, how to use a glossary, how to use an index, read the first paragraph, read the last paragraph, and then kind of skim through the middle if you don't have a lot of times, and try to think about what you already know and what the instructor may have said. So doing little mini lectures and then ask the students to read something with headings, pay attention to visual clues in your handout is something that really helps prepare students. We already talked about project-based learning. I'm hoping to have convinced you. We're finding that what holds students back a lot of times is both the language used, a lot of passives in technical construction, but also what we're calling sub-technical vocabulary. This is the kind of vocabulary that you and I, because we've gone to college, or did other sorts of education, know. So we know what an orthopedist is. We know that if we talk about cardiac arrest, it doesn't mean they arrest your heart surgeon and put him into jail. And we know that if a computer crashes, it doesn't fall physically to bits the way your car does. So teaching students the English of the professions, or the terminology that's used in different job clusters like health, IT, manufacturing, the kinds of words that you see in popular magazine, becomes really important and something for students to hang on to because vocabulary increases are much easier to achieve than general proficiency increases. So little quizzes in between make students see that they really are making progress. We've seen good results with scenarios for problem solving where you give students a situation. There you are. You've gotten sick or you just didn't feel like going to school. You ended up partying with your friends. Now all of a sudden the test is due. You're not prepared. You're afraid that you're going to flunk. You wish you had some other extra time. What are you going to do? A lot of the students that I've talked to who are just beginning college learners say, well, I just would stop going to class. You know, it's just too embarrassing. I wouldn't do well anyway. I'd flunk that class. So why give the instructor one more chance to tell me how stupid I am and how lazy I am? So a lot of students not continuing. The problem is that they don't know how. So working with the Next Step program, saying,
Ida, we're not hearing your...
okay, where do your students get into trouble? Not because they don't have enough language or literacy, but they just don't know what to do, fall behind, and don't know how to catch up. What strategies do you advise? And to a person, you know, instructors tend to say, well, they should come and see me. So we can start building that kind of strategy into our instruction as well. Then there's the various forms of digital literacy, and I don't mean learning Excel and learning all the applications and PowerPoint, but really the kind of tools that you need to learn with technology and to get things family band, to get the online skills that you need to log on and log off if you're in part of a distance learning project coming up next. Those are important skills to
Ida, we're having difficulty with your audio. Can you
I think a lot of you mentioned
microphone back
those
away from you
flexible
just a bit.
options. Evening and weekend courses are starting to be implemented and who are willing to say that they've been wanting to learn. Those blended learning models where you learn part of the time on your own and in class with a coach or with an instructor really show promise, along with those self-study options. Working with employers and having students work in the classroom. I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. I'll stop doing that and let Marian handle it. Classes that are offered at the work site. Employers a lot of times are interested in supporting those classes if they also involve technology. We've been working with a custodial program for a large school district, and basically the employer said, yes, we want students to be able to use their email, answer emails, and figure out how to get on our website, because all the cool stuff we're letting people know, all the changes are on the website. Students figured out that they needed to apply for a vacation day on the web, and boy, the skills really advanced once that need to know started to be in play. And then I think Gretchen mentioned for a lot of students who are undocumented, who don't have the option to go on into a training program that's a federally funded program, entrepreneurship classes. Classes that tell you, well, how can you get a food truck started? How can you start a small shop together with your family? What kind of paperwork do you need to do? How have other people getting started? At least give students an option to consider alternatives while they think about what their future might be. Interviewing other small shop owners. They don't have to be immigrants. You know, they can be somebody else who kind of has this little catering business for parties, and finding out how they get started develops those language skills and connects students to pathways at the same time. So you've heard all of these ideas, and I'm wondering if you see additional challenges that need to be met that are specific to your ESL students. How would you adapt the kind of programs that are in place now so they work better for your students who may still be learning English?
Haida, we have about 9 more minutes.
Okay. And those are great ideas. Keep typing and we'll collect them, and I'll move on in the interest of time. Here are some of the adaptations that I see, which are very similar to what you are identifying. And I wanted to spend a bit of time on those career development models in the field that show promise. Here is just a general program development model. You can go ahead and, sure, we've all seen this or variations of it, but I found that programs like using it to talk about each component as a way to plan what they plan to do, and to talk about how they might accomplish each one of these steps in collaboration with others. So now putting a career twist on the development. I'll have about 4 different models here. One of them is what a lot of us have already done, and this is basically focusing on workforce preparation and contextualizing our basic skills instruction either to a career cluster, basic skills for health, manufacturing, or transportation, or whatever, and building in those employability skills that we talked about, problem-solving projects, etc., and then having students move on to a possible bridge class or a possible pre-training class from there. So if your students aren't clear yet where they might go, or you have beginners, that probably is your best option. Work-based instruction, that is instruction that's supported by employers. We had mentioned that. Bringing employers in early on to let you and your team know what jobs are, what they're looking for, and from there interesting them in supporting a program for the folks who are working for them either on-site or in addition to work, preferably with some release time, is one model that works for those students who are working, if they have employers who are what we're calling quality employers, who are really concerned about their students advancing and moving up. Here's the concurrent basic model. You may know it as an adjunct model. In this model, students are dual enrolled. They take one class, which is the basic skills class, ABE, GED, ESL, and at the same time, they're involved in a technical class. The trick here is for the 2 instructors to work together, ideally to develop a joint curriculum. But if you don't have that option and your technical compatriot is only able to meet, once before the semester starts, using materials that are being used in the classroom, finding what the tasks and assignments are, using the textbook and syllabus, and identifying the underlying skills that students will need in order to keep up with the class is a model that works. Bridge programs are the ones that really start focusing in either on a cluster, a specific cluster, health manufacturing, or on a particular job. So you might have English for pharmacology, or you might have English for early childhood development, and where students then as a next step go into a training program. And again, the curriculum is informed by what the next step is. So this time it's in sequence rather than concurrently. You probably have all, or you may have heard of the iBest model. Very famous with good success rate out of Washington State. And in this model, the teacher, who's the basic skill teacher, and the technical teacher teach side by side. They teach in the same classroom. Later on, we have a link to a terrific video that features Donna Price teaching a pre-CNA class and at the same time that the nursing instructor is in the classroom and doing some basic skills, doing some skills assessment, nursing skills assessment with the students. If you're serving ESL students, a lot of times there's an extra hour built in to prepare students in terms of vocabulary or to support their learning if they get lost in all this information that they're being presented with in the technical class. Here is a model that's very complex and difficult to see, but we do have an insight, a handout for you, so you can print it out and look at it more carefully. What we've done here is working with South Texas College to outline a model that starts with a community outreach into the community and has two advisement sections. One in the beginning to find out if a student is eligible for ESL or for ABE, and then a second advisement as students move forward into a training area. I think what's interesting about this model is that it has two options. You can see towards the top, you can go towards an occupational skills area if you want to get a certificate and get a job in the trades, for example, or if you are interested in an academic career, or if you have higher skills that you bring with you from the home country, you might move into an academic pathway. In both options, there's a contextualized GED available. The academic one is similar to what LaGuardia Community College in New York is offering. And the contextualized GED for the trades just uses lots of math and reading that are linked to what students are learning in the next step class. And I think we can move back from there, Jennifer. And I wanted to end up with some good news. If you feel overwhelmed by the requirements for career pathways, which really have not fully kicked in, or by all the information and the partnerships you're supposed to have to develop, I did want to let you know that if you think back about federal aid for students, also known federal financial aid as Pell Grants, you may remember that it used to be that you could show ability to benefit, go into a program, and receive financial aid. Then it all changed, and you have to have a GED or high school equivalency to get financial aid. Now we're back to, if you can show ability to benefit by passing a non-credit class that's related to a career pathway, for example, and then move into a credit-bearing program, you are eligible for financial aid for Pell Grants, even if you don't have a GED. So we have a lot of programs that are now looking at how to put that into place for their students, working with financial aid advisors at the colleges to say this is an option that we want our students to have. Okay, there you go. And I would like to leave it open to you to see if you have some additional questions that Marianne perhaps has not answered that I can answer before we move on to resources and close this out.
Maybe while you're thinking about your questions, Haida, I can just make a quick announcement about another CalPro webinar on May 20th at the same time, 2:30 to 3:30, as Haida already mentioned, offered by Jamie Adelson Goldstein. The title of it is Paving the Way to Career Pathways, Creating the Skill On-Ramps Our Adult English Learners Need. So it's about contextualization and teaching the kind of skills that our learners are going to need in the context of what you're already doing. Some of these things I'm sure you are already doing, but you're bound to learn some new ones as well. So we hope you'll register for that webinar also.
Well, and it looks like a lot of you have gotten your questions answered or have so many questions they couldn't possibly be covered, within a short span of time. So we hope you get a chance to work with others and with us as well. If you want to send me questions personally, I'm at haida@literacywork.com, and I'll be happy to email you.
Thank you so much, Haida. And you will see when you get the PDF of the slides that Haida has provided a lot of resources for you to follow up on some of the things she's talked about. I certainly learned a lot of things today, and I hope all of you did too. If you want to join me in looking for that drop-down list next to the little person and giving some applause for Heida's great job today and lots of information. I just want to thank you, Haida, and thank all of you so much for spending some of your afternoon with us. We will be sending you a certificate, and when we close out this meeting, you should see the evaluation form pop up. If you don't, the link is in the chat, and I will just put it in there again. Whoops. Right now. And thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you everybody, and thank you for your wonderful goodbye notes. I just wanted to clarify the office. Here I am in an office. It also happens to be in my home, but we are in rural New Mexico. So if the bandwidth went in and out a little bit, I apologize, but this is the price to pay for living in a place that is rural with pecans all around you, and at least you didn't hear any traffic noise on my side. So thanks for your patience, and I appreciate your being part of it and being so great in terms of writing questions and notes. Thank you.
Thank you, Haida, and we appreciate you doing this from home. Last time I was on a webinar with Haida, we heard her peacocks squawking in the background, so we didn't get to hear that this time either. But thank you all so much. I'm closing out now, and please complete the evaluation.
Thank you, everyone.